The most feared ship on the ocean right now is not an aircraft carrier, not a destroyer, not a submarine. It is a patrol boat. A 12,000-ton white-hulled giant that outweighs most warships on Earth, and it belongs to a Coast Guard. If that sounds impossible, stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand why the smallest ships in the world's navies have quietly become the most important, and why the boat sitting at number 1 on this list has entire governments losing sleep. And here is the twist I want you to hold on to. The number 1 boat on this countdown is not the fastest, it is not the most heavily armed, and it has never fired a shot in anger. What makes it terrifying is something else entirely, and when we get there, it will change the way you look at every headline coming out of the South China Sea. Right now, as you watch this, there are thousands of patrol boats crisscrossing the planet's coastlines. They are chasing smugglers off Florida, intercepting drones in the Baltic, staring down giants in the Pacific, and fighting a live war on the rivers of Ukraine. The offshore patrol vessel market is worth almost $30 billion this year alone, and it is growing faster than almost any other category of warship. Why? Because the wars of the future are not being fought in the open ocean between fleets of destroyers. They are being fought in the shallows, in the gray zones, in the places where a $200 million frigate is too big, too slow, and too expensive to risk. This is the golden age of the patrol boat, and today we are counting down the 10 best in the world. We start the countdown in the Southern Hemisphere at number 10 with a ship that Australia is betting its entire northern border on, the Arafura class offshore patrol vessel. Picture the problem Australia faces. It has one of the longest coastlines on the planet, tens of thousands of kilometers of it, much of it remote, tropical, and completely empty. Patrolling that with full-sized warships would bankrupt the Navy. Patrolling it with small boats would be useless. The Arafura is the answer in between. 80 meters of steel, a range of 4,000 nautical miles, and a design philosophy that Australian commanders describe with 2 words: force multiplier. One Arafura can do jobs that previously required several different vessels. Border patrol 1 week, disaster relief the next, regional diplomacy the week after that. In May of 2026, the Royal Australian Navy commissioned the second ship of the class, HMS Eyre, at a ceremony in Western Australia, and the Chief of Navy stood on that dock and made it clear these ships were purpose-built to carry containerized mission systems. That phrase matters. It means the ship is essentially a floating truck bed for capability. Need a drone package? Slide it on. Need a medical facility? Slide it on. 6 of these are planned, working alongside Australia's Cape-class boats, and together they form a picket line across some of the most contested waters on Earth. It is not glamorous, it is not fast, but it is exactly what modern maritime security looks like, and that is why it earns its place on this list. But if the Arafura is a quiet professional, the next boat was born from a humiliation, and it exists for one reason. Revenge is not the right word, presence is. Number 9. The Raja Sulaiman class from the Philippines. To understand this ship, you have to go back to 2012, to a lonely piece of ocean called Scarborough Shoal, where the Philippine Navy came face to face with Chinese vessels and discovered, in real time, that it simply did not have the ships to hold its own waters. That moment broke something in Manila, and it started a modernization program that has been building momentum ever since. In January of 2026, the payoff arrived. The BRP Raja Sulaiman, first of 6 offshore patrol vessels ordered from Hyundai Heavy Industries in South Korea, sailed into Subic Bay to a hero's welcome. The Philippine Navy chief called these ships a modern symbol of courage and said their job is to safeguard the country's exclusive economic zone and, in his words, protect Filipino fishermen. Think about what that actually means. This is a warship whose primary mission is standing between fishing boats and one of the most powerful maritime forces ever assembled. 5 more of these ships arrive over the next 2 years, and every single one of them is heading into the most contested body of water on the planet. Remember that because the ship these vessels will be staring down is coming later in this countdown, and the size difference between them is going to shock you. First, though, we go to Europe, where one of the oldest navies in the world just admitted it has a serious problem, and the fix is at number 8. France, the Patrouilleur Hauturier class. Here is something most people do not realize about the French Navy. Behind the aircraft carrier and the nuclear submarines, its patrol fleet was quietly falling apart. Ships from the 1970s and 90s, worn out, breaking down, with spare parts becoming impossible to find. France was facing a gap in its ability to watch its own Atlantic coastline, which is a remarkable thing to say about a nuclear power. So in November 2023, they ordered 7 brand new offshore patrol vessels. And in February of 2026, the first one hit the water. The Trolley de Prevost launched at the Pirieu shipyard in Brittany. 92 meters long, around 2,400 tons, a range of 6,000 nautical miles, and the ability to stay at sea for 30 days straight. But here's the detail that tells you what France is really worried about. These patrol boats carry a hull-mounted sonar. Patrol boats almost never carry sonar. It adds cost, complexity, and weight for a mission most patrol ships never perform. France added it anyway, and the reason given was underwater security and the protection of its ballistic missile submarine operations. Read between the lines. France is worried about things lurking beneath its coastal waters, near the bases where its nuclear deterrent comes and goes, and it wants even its humble patrol fleet able to hunt them. The plan calls for 10 of these ships by 2035. Europe is rearming from the seafloor up. And speaking of nations building at a pace that seems almost impossible, the next entry comes from a country that plans to commission a new warship every 6 weeks. You heard that correctly. Every 6 weeks. Number 7, India's next generation offshore patrol vessel, the Shachi class. On the last day of March 2026, Goa Shipyard launched INS Shachi, the lead ship of an 11-vessel class. And on the very same day, the same shipyard delivered a separate fast patrol vessel to the Indian Coast Guard. 1 yard, 2 ships, 1 day. That is the tempo India is operating at right now, with dozens of warships under construction simultaneously and a stated ambition to grow the fleet past 200 vessels. The Shachi class itself is a serious piece of hardware. Over 100 meters long, more than 2,500 tons, 24 knots, and a range of 8,500 nautical miles, which means one of these can leave port in India and patrol deep into the Indian Ocean without refueling. The armament is where it stops looking like a Coast Guard ship and starts looking like a corvette. A super rapid gun mount on the bow, 2 AK-630 close in weapon systems that can put thousands of rounds per minute into an incoming threat, electronic warfare suites, and a full combat management system. The entire 11-ship program costs about $1.2 billion, which sounds like a lot until you realize that is roughly the price of a single destroyer elsewhere. That is the patrol boat value proposition in one sentence. 11 armed ocean-going hulls for the price of one big one. Deliveries begin in the second half of 2026, and every one of them is aimed at a very specific strategic anxiety: the growing presence of foreign warships in the Indian Ocean. Now, everything so far has been ships, big steel ocean-going vessels. The next entry is where this list changes character completely, because number 6 is a boat you can lift with a crane, drop into a war zone, and it is fighting in one right now. The Mark VI patrol boat, built by Safe Boats International in Washington State. This is one of the strangest stories in modern naval procurement. The U.S. Navy designed the Mark VI as its premier littoral patrol craft. 85 feet of aluminum, over 35 knots, a range of 750 nautical miles, and a 30-millimeter Bushmaster chain gun on the bow. It was fully networked, packed with sensors, comfortable enough for a crew of 10 to live aboard for days, and tough enough to shrug off high sea states. And then the Navy almost killed it. The boats were deemed expensive to maintain, they were not being used enough, And by 2021, the Navy was openly discussing shelving the entire fleet. The Mark VI was, on paper, a failure. Then Russia's war on Ukraine changed everything. Ukraine had lost most of its navy when Crimea was seized. And when it went looking for a way to rebuild, it did not ask for frigates. It asked for Mark VIs. The U.S. State Department approved a package of up to 16 boats worth $600 million, fitted with 30-millimeter cannons, gyro-stabilized gun systems, and infrared sensors. The final boats of the order were scheduled to be completed by March of 2026, and the platform the U.S. Navy nearly gave up on is now central to the defense of a nation at war. Sometimes, a weapon is not wrong, it is just waiting for its war. Keep that thought, because at number 2, there is another small boat that found its war, and what it is doing to the Russian military right now is the stuff of nightmares. Before that, we need to talk about the hardest working patrol boat in the Western Hemisphere. Number 5, the Sentinel-class fast response cutter of the United States Coast Guard. If this countdown were ranked purely on results, on drugs seized, migrants rescued, and lives saved, the Sentinel might be number 1, because no patrol boat on Earth works harder. 154 feet long, 28 knots, a 25-millimeter autocannon, 450 caliber machine guns, and a party trick that transformed Coast Guard operations, a stern ramp that launches and recovers a 26-foot interceptor boat while underway. That means a Sentinel does not have to catch a smuggler's go-fast boat itself. It just gets close and releases its own hunter. The design is based on a proven Dutch Damen patrol vessel built in Louisiana by Bollinger Shipyards, and the numbers tell you everything about how much the United States trusts it. The 60th boat, the Frederick Mann, was commissioned in Kodiak, Alaska in February 2026 to patrol the Bering Sea and the North Pacific, some of the most violent waters on the planet. And the program keeps growing. The Coast Guard recently exercised a $500 million option for 10 more hulls, taking the total on order to 77 boats. 77. Most countries do not have 77 ships in their entire navy. These cutters are not just sitting in American harbors either. A squadron of them operates out of Bahrain, patrolling the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most strategically sensitive waterways on Earth. That is the quiet genius of the Sentinel. It is small enough to be affordable in bulk, capable enough to deploy globally, and there are so many of them that somewhere in the world, at this exact moment, one of them is almost certainly chasing someone. But raw work ethic is one thing, raw speed is another. The next 3 boats on this list are where patrol craft stop being practical and start being frightening, and number 4 accelerates harder than most sports cars have any right to. The Shaldag Mark V from Israel Shipyards in Haifa, 0 to 40 knots in 60 seconds. Let that sink in. This is a 95-ton vessel, 32.5 meters of welded aluminum, and it accelerates to 74 kilometers per hour, faster than some cars merge onto a highway with a top speed north of 40 knots, and variants in the family capable of even more. The Shaldag was born in the late 1980s from a very specific Israeli problem: terrorists approaching the coast in small, fast craft, and the solution was a boat that could intercept anything, in any sea state, immediately. The deep V hull keeps it stable and dry at speeds that would hammer other boats to pieces, and decades of continuous combat experience have been folded back into every new version. But here is what makes the Mark V special: the firepower to displacement ratio. This little boat can carry a stabilized 25-millimeter cannon, remote weapon stations, and up to 8 short-range missiles. The Philippine Navy ordered a fleet of them, and some of those boats carry Spike NLAWS missiles that can hit targets 25 kilometers away. 25 kilometers from a boat the size of a superyacht tender. That is a Corvette's punch in a package that can operate in water barely deeper than a swimming pool, and it is why navies from Manila to Dakar have signed up. The Shaldag is what happens when speed becomes a weapon. And yet, it is not even close to the fastest boat on this list. The next entry holds a record that has stood essentially unchallenged among armed warships for a quarter of a century, and the way it achieves that speed sounds like science fiction. Number 3, Norway's Skjold class. 60 knots, 110 kilometers per hour. That is not a typo, and it is not a burst figure from a stripped-down speedboat. That is the top speed of a fully armed, missile-carrying warship. And when the Skjold class entered service, it was the fastest combat ship afloat anywhere in the world. How is that even possible? Because the Skjold is barely a boat at all. It is a surface effect ship, a catamaran built from carbon fiber composites with a fan-blown air cushion trapped between its twin hulls. The vessel literally rides on a bubble of air, skimming the water instead of pushing through it, powered by 4 gas turbines feeding twin water jets. And Norway did not stop at speed. The entire ship is a stealth design, faceted surfaces, radar-absorbing materials built into the structure itself, flush hatches, screened windows. On radar, this 50-meter warship is a ghost. Now add the weapons. 8 naval strike missiles, the same sea-skimming ship killers being bought by the US Navy, plus a 76mm super rapid gun. The concept is pure Norwegian geography. Hide among the fjords and islands, invisible, then burst out at 60 knots, launch a missile salvo, and vanish before the enemy understands what happened. Norway planned to retire these boats, then looked at the state of the world and changed its mind. In February 2026, a new contract was signed to upgrade their fire control radars and electro-optical sensors, specifically to track small, fast-moving objects like drones. The fastest warship afloat is being retooled for the drone age, which brings us to the final 2. And this is where the countdown gets uncomfortable, because the last 2 boats represent 2 completely different visions of naval power. One is a boat that wins by fighting. The other is a ship that wins without fighting at all. And the fighter is at number 2, pulled straight from the headlines of an active war. The Combat Boat 90, the CB90 from Sweden. 16 meters of Swedish aluminum, 40+ knots from twin water jets, a draft of less than 1 meter, and handling so violent it borders on unreasonable. A CB90 at full speed can execute turns that would capsize other boats, and it can go from that speed to a dead stop in a couple of boat lengths. It carries up to 21 fully equipped troops, puts them on any beach, riverbank, or rock, and disappears. More than 250 of them operate worldwide, and the commander of the Ukrainian Navy recently called them, flatly, among the best in the world. He would know, because Ukraine is using them in combat right now. On the Dnipro River, CB90s are running interdiction missions, inserting special forces behind Russian lines, ambushing supply routes, and evacuating troops under fire, using their speed and shallow draft to operate in places Russian forces cannot effectively cover. Sweden has responded by opening the taps. Its largest military aid package ever is pushing Ukraine's CB90 fleet toward 38 boats, with combat modules included, while Sweden simultaneously ordered 22 new boats to replenish its own fleet. And the platform keeps evolving. In February 2026, Sweden became the first NATO customer for the Rheinmetall Sea Snake 30mm remote gun system, ordering it specifically for its newest CB90s with airburst ammunition designed to shred drone swarms out of the sky. Think about the arc of this design. Conceived in the 80s to defend Swedish archipelagos, now fighting Russia on Ukrainian rivers and being armed against threats that did not exist 5 years ago. If any boat on this list has earned the number 1 spot through sheer performance, it is this one. So why is it not number 1? Because the top of this list is not about performance. I told you at the start that the most feared patrol boat in the world has never fired a shot in anger, that it is not the fastest, not the most armed. It is time to pay that off. Number 1, China Coast Guard vessel 5901, the ship the entire Pacific calls the Monster. Every other boat on this countdown is measured in tens of meters and tens or hundreds of tons. CCG 5901 is 165 meters long and displaces 12,000 tons. It is bigger than a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke destroyer. It is roughly double the size of an American Ticonderoga cruiser. It is 3 times the size of the U.S. Coast Guard's largest regular cutters. It is, by an enormous margin, the largest Coast Guard vessel ever built by any nation in history, and it is painted white with Coast Guard markings because that is the entire point. Here's the game being played. A gray-hulled Navy warship steaming into disputed waters is an act of military escalation, the kind that triggers alliances and crisis meetings. A white-hulled Coast Guard ship doing the exact same thing is officially law enforcement. So, China built a law enforcement vessel the size of a cruiser, armed it with a 76mm naval gun, secondary cannons, and anti-aircraft weapons, gave it a flight deck and a hangar for large helicopters, and sent it out to enforce claims covering nearly the entire South China Sea. Analysts have a name for this: gray zone warfare. Aggression calibrated to stay just below the threshold that would justify a military response. And 5901 is the ultimate gray zone weapon, because its weapon is not its gun, its weapon is its shadow. In 2024, it traced a route through the sea that analysts noted resembled China's 9-dash line itself, a patrol pattern as a territorial statement passing through the waters of multiple neighboring countries. Off the Philippines, it has anchored deep inside the exclusive economic zone and simply stayed for months, outlasting every ship Manila sent to watch it. In early 2025, it loitered within 50 nautical miles of Luzon, the island where the Philippine capital sits, broadcasting that it was conducting law enforcement in what it considers Chinese jurisdiction, 600 miles from the Chinese mainland. The Philippines sent the BRP Cabra to challenge it, a 330-ton patrol boat circling a 12,000-ton giant, a ship 1/36th its size. That image is the entire strategic situation in the Pacific compressed into a single photograph. And in January 2026, after nearly a year away, the monster came back, reappearing near Sabina Shoal and Second Thomas Shoal inside Philippine waters, escorted by smaller Coast Guard ships and maritime militia vessels, just as the Philippines was taking delivery of the new patrol ships we covered at number 9. Vietnam has watched it prowl its oil fields near Vanguard Bank. Indonesia has tracked it in the North Natuna Sea. Malaysia has shadowed it off Laconia Shoals. One ship, patrolling an area of ocean, claimed against the interests of half a dozen nations, and no one can do anything about it because shooting at a Coast Guard ship makes you the aggressor. That is why CCG 5901 is number 1. Not because it would win a battle, but because it wins every single day without one. It has redefined what a patrol boat is, not a vessel that watches the sea, but a vessel that claims it. So step back and look at what this countdown actually revealed. At number 10, a ship built to cover impossible distances. At 6 and 2, small boats fighting a real war and rewriting their own reputations in the process. At 5, a fleet so large it patrols 2 hemispheres at once. At 4 and 3, speed pushed to the edge of physics. And at number 1, a ship that weaponized size itself. 10 boats, and between them, the whole story of modern conflict at sea. The multi-billion-dollar patrol vessel boom is not an accident. Navies everywhere have realized that the fight for the oceans will not be decided by a handful of giant warships in some climactic battle. It will be decided by presence, by who is there every day in the shallows and the straits and the disputed shoals. When the pressure comes, aircraft carriers make headlines. Patrol boats make facts on the water. And here is the closing thought I want to leave you with. Right now, in the South China Sea, there are moments when a 12,000-ton monster and a fleet of boats, a fraction of its size, are within sight of each other. Engines idling, cameras rolling, each one daring the other to blink. The next major crisis at sea probably will not start with a missile launch. It will start with 2 patrol boats, a collision, or a water cannon, or a boarding gone wrong, in waters most people could not find on a map. The smallest ships in the world are carrying the biggest stakes. If this changed how you see naval power, you know what to do. Which of these 10 would you want defending your coastline? The monster or the boats that hunt in packs? Tell me below, and I will see you in the next one.